Do you want to connect with your customer on a deeper level than you ever have before? It will help when you understand their very own personal brand. Stay tuned to learn more.
Welcome to The Buyer's Mind, where we take a closer look deep inside your customer's decision-making mechanism to reverse engineer the perfect sales presentation. Now, please welcome your host, Jeff Shore.
Welcome, everyone, to The Buyer's Mind, a podcast for sales and marketing professionals where we investigate exactly what is going on in the brains of prospects who are considering a purchase decision, the nitty and the gritty of buyer psychology, if you will. And my take on this is that if I understand the way that a buyer wants to buy, if I understand the process by which they make decisions, I can reverse engineer my sales presentation. And that's what this podcast is all about. It's about taking a stroll through the mind of a buyer. But we'd like to have some fun along the way and celebrate this world of sales. I think you'll enjoy it. I'm your host, Jeff Shore. You can read the full bio in the show notes, or you can visit jeffshore.com, sign up for our free weekly video newsletter, a little Saturday morning inspiration, just a few minutes long to help you get your weekend started off right. And make sure you stay with us because we're running a contest here and you do not want to miss it. At the end of the podcast, we'll tell you how to win some great stuff. I'm joined by our show producer, Mr. Paul Murphy. Murph, how you doing today?
Hey, Jeff, it's great to be with you today.
Fantastic. Thank you. Hey, I got to tell you, Murph, I was in the Phoenix airport here just last week, and Facebook has a big standing display there in the middle of the airport where you can try out virtual reality. And I put on the headset and the music that went along with it, and I stood there and I took this tour, and it was just absolutely mind-blowing. I would do it again tomorrow. You're the tech guy. What do you see as the future of virtual reality?
Well, coming from the video world, I have to say that virtual reality seems to play best when it's in games. Not so much movies, because movies are something you experience just watching them, but virtual reality immerses you into that world. And so my middle son, who's into video gaming, I would say is more into virtual reality by the nature of what gaming does. Gaming immerses you into an experience, and that's what virtual reality does. So the most interesting thing that I've heard of is a VR game called Snow World, which helps burn victims to endure the painful treatments that they go through. And because their focus is on the game and not the treatments, they're able to get through so much more of the treatment and heal faster because of a VR game.
That is absolutely amazing. That is really, really cool. And yeah, if you're going to go through something like that, having something that just completely takes all of the senses seems that it would be a great distraction. That is awesome. I'm looking forward. Now, have you tried the VR gaming? Have you put on the headset there? What do you think?
So I don't have any personal experience with the VR headset or actually doing any kind of VR games. I can only imagine as an entertainment piece that it just doesn't work for movies. But in a game sense, it does bring you into a community of players, and you're able to look at a virtual world that you wouldn't otherwise be able to really imagine.
Right. Well, there's no question it is the wave of the future. I think we're going to see more and more commercial applications by way of how we demonstrate product and how we see things that are just coming off the shelf on VR. Very cool. Well, let's talk about today's show, and I want to start with a question. Do you ever feel like you are disconnected from your customer? Like you're trying, but it's not clicking, and you sense some amount of distrust. You haven't done anything wrong, but the customer just seems resistant. You know what I'm talking about? Well, I know because I am that guy. When I'm actually considering buying something, I can be surprisingly closed when I'm talking to a salesperson. Now, that said, I know me well. And if you choose to know me well as well, I'll do whatever you tell me to do. You can lead me wherever you think I need to go, so long as I believe that you are acting in my best interest. And on today's show, we're going to look at how to understand your customer in a very unique way by understanding the concept of personal brand. It's a fascinating way to be able to see your customer through different eyes. Well, in each episode, we throw out there a quote of the day. This one today comes from the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu, who says, "At the center of your being, you have the answer. You know who you are, and you know what you want." Now, look, we can apply that in a deeply philosophical way. We can ask those important questions of life. but I look at that quote and how it applies to your customers. Deep down, each prospect has a personal brand. It may not be well defined, but they know who they are and they know what they want. And the question is, do you get that? Do you understand that? How does your brand, your company brand, your product brand match with theirs? And this is appropriate as we kick off this episode, which is all about knowing our customers and along the way learning a thing or two about ourselves. And we want you to know that this podcast is brought to you in part by our good friends at Home Street Bank. Home Street is not just our show sponsor, they are my lender of choice. I used Home Street in my last home purchase, and I have to tell you, the smoothest transaction I have ever had, and I've purchased quite a few homes. They're professional, they're dependable, great rates, great service, and if you're a real estate professional, you just won't find better people to work with in taking care of your clients. And they can do it all. Banking, home loans, credit lines, anything you need. Just go to homestreetbank.com to learn more. That's homestreetbank.com. Now, coming up in just a few minutes, I'll talk to the foremost expert on branding today, Bruce Turkel. I first met Bruce at the National Speakers Association convention several years ago, and I have to tell you, that is not an easy audience to speak to, but Bruce had the room mesmerized. Bruce understands this thing called brand more than anyone else that I've ever met. But today we're going to look to find the intersection between your company's brand and your prospect's personal brand. I guarantee you this is mind-blowing stuff. Before we get to that, we want to bring you our sales tip of the day, and it is this. If you really want to understand your customer, think +1. Now, what do I mean by that? I'm referring to one more piece of information. Your customer is answering a question and they give you some insight, but you want to go +1, a little deeper dive. The technique to get there? Tell me more. You can make a living off of the phrase, tell me more. Just very casually, very comfortably. So tell me more about that. I want you to think of yourself like a counselor. That is what counselors do. It is their most popular question. Tell me more about that. And in all of its iterations. Oh, why is that important to you? Okay, how did you come to that conclusion? It's just that +1. When you think you understand a customer, dive a little deeper. And here's my suggestion. Practice this in your daily life. Make it a life habit. You will learn so much more about people, about prospects, about friends, about the waiter at the restaurant you go to tonight if you just go one level deeper. This is where the real gems of information are found. Think +1 and get to know your customer like you never have before. Now, before we move on to my interview with Bruce Turkel, I want to let you know about an opportunity to work on how to overcome objections. I wrote my very first book on this subject 12 years ago. It's called Deal With It, and it addresses just how we deal with some of the most common sales objections that you're going to hear. How to ask for the sale when a decision maker is absent. How to handle, we want to think about it. What happens when he likes it and she doesn't. And a whole lot more. These are real, proven, applicable techniques and strategies for handling some of the thornier situations that come up in a sales conversation. You can buy it right now at Amazon.com, or you can go to jeffshore.com/closing. And managers, I can get you a deal if you want copies for your team. Just contact us at kevin@jeffshore.com. Well, let's go to our interview. Bruce Turkel has helped create some of the world's most compelling brands, including a brand called Miami. We're going to definitely unpack that. How does one go about branding a city? I'd kind of like to know. The client list is remarkable. Hasbro, Nike, American Express, Charles Schwab, Citicorp, Discovery Networks, you name it. He's a speaker, he's an author, and he's all over the place. And he is the leading authority on the subject of branding. Please welcome Bruce Turkel. Bruce?
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you very much.
Glad to have you here. You created a brand called Miami. I think that bears a little bit of explanation here.
Well, it's interesting. I grew up here. I was actually born on Miami Beach, and I grew up here, and it was always a dream of mine to be able to market my hometown. And that dream came true. Unfortunately, it came true just a couple of years after Time magazine had us on the cover with the headline Paradise Lost, and Miami Vice was playing up all the bad things that were happening here. As I tell people, when I would travel 20 years ago and people would say, "Where are you from?" I'd say Miami, and they'd say, "Oh." Now, when I travel, people say, where are you from? I say, Miami. And they say, oh, that same word, but said in such a different way, is what we did for the city. We changed the way the city was perceived. We changed the perception that the consumers had, visitors had, for what they would find when they got here.
That is so cool, and other cities have mirrored that. You see it on a regular basis as cities that have had a really bad reputation say, "Hey, what has happened?" We saw it in Miami. We certainly saw it in Manhattan. Very, very cool. You're a brand expert. That's interesting to me because I sense that just about everybody thinks that they're a brand expert in some way. It's sort of like everybody says, oh, I know marketing. Well, do you really? But you have the bona fides here. Is this something you've always had a knack for? Did you stumble it? How does one become a brand expert?
You know, it's funny. It's the three things that every American man can do. I can coach football better than that idiot down there. I can drive that car around the track faster than those morons. And I can make better ads than that garbage you see on television.
Yeah.
You're right, Jeff. Everybody thinks they can do it. And in fact, they can do it. They just can't do it well. Mm-hmm. And that's the difference. Was it something I always had a knack for? Well, I started in design. I got a design degree and I worked at design firms and I opened a design firm. And then I morphed it from there into advertising. But what I found really turned me on and really mattered to my clients who were trying to sell more product was not how they changed their operations or even how they designed their products. That was critical, mind you. Mm-hmm. But what really mattered was the way their consumers, and more importantly, their potential consumers, thought about them. What was the perception that consumers had about the product they were buying? And whether you're talking to salespeople about to go into a room with a prospect, or you're an employee in a big company, or you're working in the marketing department of a company trying to sell that company's products, what the customer thinks about what it is you're trying to sell matters more than anything. So a good 20, 25 years ago, we moved more and more into understanding brands and building brands.
I find that fascinating because when you look at what the brand that the CEO is thinking that he or she carries for that company might be a complete disconnect from the sort of ill-defined, vague brand, or maybe it's very clearly defined brand on behalf of the customer that might be in complete opposite of what that CEO is thinking.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that happens so often because people have it very clear in their minds what they do and what they sell. But unfortunately, most people in business, most salespeople deal with function because it's our job as business people to keep function operating, to make sure our product works, to make sure our product is manufactured on time, to make sure the distribution chain is humming along, to make sure that we can keep our prices competitive. And ultimately, although all those things matter, and they matter critically, don't get me wrong, but ultimately, the consumer doesn't really think of any of those things. Mm-hmm. And it's what the consumer thinks of the product that matters the most. It's not function. All the things you mentioned, all the things I mentioned are what we call RTBs, reasons to believe. Once I tell you why my brand matters to you, I can then back it up with all the things I spend so much time, money, and effort working on every single day, the RTBs. But it's not the way to lead.
But even there, you have to understand the avatar of your customer well enough to know that this is a reason for them to believe, because we see that disconnect too. I certainly see it in the sales standpoint, where a salesperson is a true believer in something that means relatively little to the customer.
Well, exactly right. Obvious understanding of that is the title of my new book, All About Them. Them is not the CEO. Them is not the CMO. Them are not the people in the company. Them is the customer. The sales message, the positioning, and ultimately the brand must be all about them. Stop talking about yourself. Start talking about why you matter to them.
I have to assume that the entire world is kind of a branding playground for you. Is that, first of all, is that accurate? And secondly, are you more likely to go, that's cool, or what were you thinking?
Yes, the whole world is a branding playground. A couple ways. First of all, everything you see, every company that's trying to market themselves or every politician that's running for office is really, when you peel the onion back, building a brand. Mm-hmm. So everything that I watch is an educational opportunity for me. But the other reason it's a playground is we get to work all over the world, going around and showing people how to do this. And you said it exactly right. Sometimes we say, oh, that was awesome. Boy, I wish I had thought of that. That's cool. And other times you think, really? That's what you came up with?
It is. I mean, look, I don't pretend to be a marketing expert. I'm a sales guy, but even I can smell it a mile away. And usually, I think it's because I'm seeing it as a consumer, and I go, what you think your brand is right now is nowhere close to what I think your brand is right now, and that's where the disconnect. It really turns me off. I end up looking at it as a consumer and saying, I don't really want to be a part of that because you're not being genuine right here.
Well, you just said a couple things in that one sentence, a couple very, very important points. I love when you said about you're a sales guy, you're not a marketing expert, because the kiss of death I find so often is when you go into a company and they introduce you to the director of sales and marketing, since they are both such entirely different disciplines. Although, let's be honest, one cannot function without the other. Both are very, very important, and both make a huge difference. But then you even said something more important, which is that the brand is all about authenticity. We now, as consumers, have such ability to access information that there is just no way a company can pull one over on us unless we let them do it. And there's two ways that we let them do it. Either we don't care enough to look into who they are and what they do, or we're so romanced by what it is they're telling us and what it is they're showing us that we allow it to happen anyways. But the truth is today, if you are not expressing your authenticity, two things happen. Number one, your customer will know you're a fraud because, again, they can go online and find out anything they want to know about you almost immediately. But number two, if you're not selling your authenticity, you don't have very much else to sell because everything else you do, a customer can buy it somewhere else. Of course, they can't do it as well as you do it. They can't do it as intelligently as you can do it. I know, because you and the listeners are the best at it in the world. I get that. However, thanks to the democratization of media, thanks to the internet, which allows us to access anyone, anywhere, anytime for anything, if we don't give the world our own authenticity, we're just another purveyor of stuff.
So that separation, that unique authenticity is really a way to stay out of the commodity trap then. Because like for me, for example, I'm brand loyal to Infiniti. I'm on my 4th Infiniti. When it's time to buy another car, it's easy for me. I'm so brand loyal that I don't even think about it. It's where I am going to go first because I believe in the authenticity of the brand. But if I didn't carry that brand, boy, now it's a commodity. I'm just trying to figure out what's the right car with the right features with the right price, and it's a much more difficult process for me.
I love the car analogy because autos are a great example. First of all, everyone in your audience knows about every car brand. So when we talk about them, they know what we're talking about, although they may never have actually thought about it very strongly. But number two, to go back to what we talked about earlier, the importance or lack of importance of function. The function of an automobile is to get you from point A to point B. If a car does not do that, you're not buying it. But just because a car does do that doesn't mean you're buying it anyways.
Right.
And I respect your love for the Infiniti brand. If you're honest with yourself, I don't think you can really convince me that an Infiniti gets you from point to A to point B better than a Mercedes-Benz or a Hyundai or a Chevy or whatever. From a functional point of view, even a brand evangelical like you would admit that the other, you've rented cars, they will get you there.
Right.
But there's something deeper. And what that deeper is a combination of the authenticity of the brand and the fact that the brand now says something about you. We used to say you are what you eat. We now say you are what you consume. And an Infiniti in your driveway says something about who you are as a person, a professional, and really talks about how you want to promote your brand.
I have to tell you just this real quick story. I knew I'm an Apple guy. You're an Apple guy, and the story's a little dated, but I just love it because it speaks to brand alignment so much. And you remember the commercials way back when, the two guys standing next to each other. I'm a PC, I'm a Mac, right? And the PC sort of absolutely the stodgy. You don't want to be that guy. And even though when those commercials came out, I mean, I didn't look like he was the original hipster, right? I didn't look like a hipster. I had already lost my hair, but I wanted to be that guy and associate with that guy. Well, I'm sitting at an airport, and I'm waiting for my flight. I open my computer. I start to work. A guy sits next to me at the exact same time, opens his computer. I've got a Mac. He's got a PC. 5 minutes later, I look over at him, and he's still waiting for his virus scan to finish. And meanwhile, I've gotten 5 minutes. He looks at me. This is what he said. He looks at me. He goes, "You know that commercial for Apple? You know, yeah, I'm the fat guy." That's what he says. And I just love that because it not only did Apple point out who I am, he pointed out who he doesn't want to be. That's a stroke of genius as far as I'm concerned.
They were phenomenal ads, Jeff. I'm so glad you brought that up because they also pointed out something else that we've discussing. Nowhere in those ads, or to tell you the truth, nowhere in any of the advertising or marketing that Apple does, do they talk about function. In the computer business, it's called speeds and feeds. How many megahertz, how many megawatts, how many kilobytes, whatever. Apple doesn't talk about any of that stuff. You're not buying the product because of function. Function is critical to its operation, but you're buying something else. You're not the fat guy, as you so cleanly put it.
I want to shift gears here a little bit. We talk about corporate brands, but I want to get into personal brands. And I'm coming at this with the idea that we all carry this often vaguely defined sense of what a personal brand is, and it reflects in our clothes and our cars, our restaurant choices. How real is that concept of personal brand?
Well, the concept is as real as the concept of branding a company or branding a destination or branding anything else. People make decisions very quickly the minute you walk up. What's that old saying? You never get a second chance to make a first impression. And your brand, how it presents your authentic self, and then more importantly, how it confirms and reinforces it over time, is exactly what it is your customers are buying. Because anyone who believes that the product you sell them they can't get anywhere else is kidding themselves. They're not just buying a product. They're buying a product from you. And what they're buying from you is what your personal brand tells them about who you are and why you matter to them.
So that means that on at least on a non-conscious level, we are seeking out a brand alignment. It may not be at the top of our list. I might ask you what's important to you, and you might say, well, it's the price and it's the features and it does this or this. But the bottom line is I want to go find that brand alignment.
Well, absolutely. And I love what you said about it may not be on top of the list. It won't be on a list. Someone might say, I want to trust the salesperson, or, I want to hire an employee that I can relate to if you're looking for a job, if that's the product you're selling. But mostly people don't think about that. It's like going to a therapist and the therapist says, well, Jeff, I understand your problem. Now tell me what you feel. And you say, well, I think that, and you start talking. The therapist will interrupt you and say, I didn't ask you to tell me what you think. I asked you to tell me what you feel. But most of us don't operate on that level. We don't really see how those things affect us, but they do. And they do it so strongly that once we understand what we're presenting, what we're projecting, and why it matters, everything starts to change because we become so much more powerful once we're able to give our audiences what they want and how they can both mirror and adhere to what it is we're showing them. What did the Beatles say at the end of Abbey Road? In the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. And I know that's kind of a woo-woo way of explaining it, but it really makes a lot of sense. We get what we put out. It works because people say, I want to be around that person. I want some of that. I trust, I like, I enjoy, whatever the adjective is, what they offer.
Let's talk about the book then, because I think this is a good segue. And I've penned 6 books myself, and every book has been written to some extent out of a sense of frustration, right? I don't ever want to write a book just because I have a message and dang it, I want to share it. I mean, every book that I've written has been to try and meet some sort of need. And when you were describing even the title, All About Them, earlier in the episode, you were talking about it. I could almost hear that frustration in your voice that marketers are getting this wrong because it's all about us. Talk to us a little about the origin and why you felt it necessary to write the book in the first place.
I spoke at a conference on Saturday last weekend, and I was explaining to the folks in the audience, a professional group, about how they could build their personal brands in order to sell their professional services. And at one point, I'm going through all the different points, many of which are counterintuitive. And a woman in the audience puts her hand up and she says, can I ask you a question? We're all successful. We've all been doing really well in our businesses. But if I listen to everything you say, you're suggesting that most of what we did wrong. Is that true? And, obviously I learned a lesson about how I have to present counterintuitive messaging. There was a big lesson for me. But the other thing I said was, no, you didn't do anything wrong. The problem is nobody teaches you this stuff. You go out there and you start building a business or building a sales team or building your own personal or professional service. And nobody says to you, here's what matters. Here's how you make it happen. So yes, in fact, I have had a level of frustration because when I go explain these things to people, they often look at me like I have two heads. Then when I use examples, some of the examples of the folks we've worked for, some examples of politicians, because those are timely branding lessons for them. When I do that, you can see the eyes opening up. You can see the darkness kind of fading away and people going, oh, I get it. Now, the origin of this book is a little bit different. My last book, also based out of a frustration I had, came out in 2007. It was called Building Brand Value. And it was about how you built a brand, the 7 steps to building a brand. And I wrote it specifically because we would pitch business and we wouldn't always win the business. And then I would watch what the winners would do for these potential clients. And I was so frustrated because I thought they did such a bad job. And it dawned on me, if I could spend my time showing them the right way, teaching them the right way to build a brand, then when we presented those protocols, they get it because they knew what it took. Of those 7 points, the first one was all about them. And what happened was over the next 7 or so years that I spoke about the book, I spoke at a lot of universities, I spoke in a lot of marketing departments of very, very large Fortune 500 companies. And I would ask the marketing people, after you read the book, do me a favor and don't just review it, but tell me if I left anything out. Tell me if you see anything missing. Not only did they not see anything missing, but it dawned on me over time that the first rule, all about them, was the most important of all 7. And if you got that right, you could actually drop the ball on a lot of the others and it wouldn't matter. When I went to my publisher with the new book idea, he said to me, oh, so then you're going to write 6 more, right? Oh, that's genius. You have the 7 points and now you're going to write a book on each point. But I'm not going to do that. It was just that this one point, all about them, was so important.
Yeah. It's interesting, you talk about building a personal brand, and you had just said we build our personal brand in order to sell our professional services and really as a foundation for what that customer is going to connect to. When you look at your personal, at the Bruce Turkel personal brand, it's very interesting. You are not afraid to put yourself out there. I mean, you talk about politics, for crying out loud. Who talks about politics? You can't talk about politics. How much do you think about your personal brand? Or do you just look at it and go, you know what? My brand is authenticity. This is who I am. You like it, great. If you don't like it, yeah, it's fine too. How much do you think about your personal brand?
Well, I think about it all the time, obviously, because I'm not going to succumb to the problem that the cobbler's kids have no shoes. But I think you brought up something very interesting when you said, if you like it, fine. If you don't like it, fine. I have a buddy that I run with 4 or 5 mornings a week. We spend a lot of sweaty miles alongside each other, talking about business. And one of the things that I've been trying to impress on him is that not everybody who asks about your product or service is a client. If you try to modify who you are and what you do to fit everybody, you'll wind up fitting nobody because you'll be pablum, you'll be uninteresting. Not everybody is a customer. So he has a price he charges for his professional fees. They're pretty expensive. But when someone hems and haws and wants to do it for less or work by the hour, he used to be willing to do that. I've explained to him, somebody who won't pay you, let me just make these numbers up, somebody who won't pay you $15,000 probably won't pay you $12,000. And they probably won't pay you $9,000. You know what that person is called? Not a customer. Therefore, modifying who you are and what you do doesn't make any sense. As far as the politics go, I always try to preface it by saying, listen, I'm sure you like a candidate and I'm sure you hate a candidate. I'm sure you're partisan and I'm sure you have very strict and solid beliefs. And I'm not here to question any of them. Your politics are your own business. But I want to play up what just happened in this election, or I want to talk about what just happened in this instance, because the branding lessons are so powerful. Afterwards, hey, Jeff, you want to go to the bar, grab a beer, and we can argue politics? Let's go. But right now, I always tell them, I'm not talking about politics. So I gave a course once on presentation skills. And I said to people, in my opinion, Bill Clinton is the best speaker I've ever seen. And some of the people in the room applaud, some of the people in the room boo. And I said what I just said to you. Hey, listen, when we get done with this, you want to meet in the bar and have a drink? Let's do it. And we can argue politics. My guess is when I'm done with my course here, you won't know which side I'm on, because that's not what I'm here for. Mm-hmm. But if you like Bill Clinton, then you're going to dislike Elizabeth Dole. If you like Elizabeth Dole, or if you don't like Elizabeth Dole, whatever. Mm-hmm. The point is, I'm going to talk about both of them. And then I'm going to talk about Aristide from Haiti. And I'm going to talk about Jose Maria from Costa Rica, because I saw them all speak. And what they did are all lessons that you need to learn. Who's better at it than the people who get us to vote for them? And so if you close yourself off to that because your partisanship does not allow you to look at it from 50,000 feet, the only person you're doing a disservice to is yourself.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. We're just about out of time. You mentioned three entities of brand, essentially. There's a company brand, there is a customer's personal brand, and then there is a salesperson's brand. Any tips from the book about how a salesperson approaches the idea of how they can both understand and then be true to their own personal brand?
Well, absolutely. I believe that the branding tools that I'm trying to share work across the board. So in the first chapter, I talk about kids out of college looking for their first job and writing a resume, and how to apply these tools to the resume. To your point, I talk about politics. I talk about automobiles. I talk about medical healthcare. I talk about all these different things. And I talk about salespeople and how they can apply these tools. By the way, any salesperson who tells you, oh, it doesn't matter, it's just price, it's just product, ask them if they'd ever get up in the morning and go to a sales call and not put on the right suit or the right outfit. That's, by the way, in marketing, that's called packaging. Mm-hmm. We all do it. Mm-hmm. Products get packaged and salespeople package themselves. Ask any salespeople, would you not learn all the information you need to not only answer your potential customers' questions, but to overcome their objectives? That's simply called research. And all marketers do research to understand their product and their customer. What I'm trying to say is that the techniques that marketers have used for years to make one product worth more than another, even though if you peel back the onion, the products are almost identical. Those differences are the same differences and the same tools that salespeople can use and profit from.
Fantastic. Great stuff. If you want to learn more about Bruce Turkel, you can go to bruceturkel.com. That's Turkel.com. You can buy the book all about them on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or wherever you want to find that. But you really want to look at this to try and figure out how to establish your personal brand. Bruce, I can't thank you enough. Absolutely fascinating stuff. My head is spinning with thoughts and ideas that I need to unpack, but really, really good stuff. Thanks for being on the show.
It was a real treat, Jeff. Thank you for inviting me.
You betcha. Well, great stuff with Bruce Turkel. I mean, how often do you get to talk to somebody who rebranded an entire city? That was very, very cool. Murph, any immediate reaction to that conversation?
So my takeaway was that as a company, you need to stop talking about yourself and start talking about why you matter to your customer.
Yeah, the whole idea of each and every customer carrying their own brand anyway. And so if I carry my brand into an environment and now you're talking all about your product, your features, how great it is, and there's a conflict with my brand, then you are Charlie Brown's teacher at that point. I'm not hearing, it's just wah, 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 wah. I'm not hearing a word that you're going to say at that point. So it seems to me that sense of personal brand that we carry around becomes something of a filter by which we evaluate, goods and services as consumers. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. I mean, we hang out with people that usually like the same things that we do, and so we want our personal brand to line up with brands that we associate ourselves with.
Do you have a pet brand? Is there a favorite brand out there that you look at and you go, oh, I love this brand over here?
I guess of all the brands out there, as a video person, I like Sony. That's because of the quality that they project, and that's what I want to see in the productions that I make, is that kind of quality.
Right. I love it. And you get some brand loyalty and you start adopting that brand. I mentioned in the interview my brand preference for Infinity. I'm an Apple guy. I think we can really take this all the way down into just about anything, even to the restaurants that we choose to eat at. But what it really comes down to is that I feel better where there is a brand alignment. I don't really think I've given that as much credit as I probably should. But when there is a strong sense of brand alignment with the company that I'm doing business with, whether buying their goods or taking their service, whatever it is, I don't think I've paid enough attention to how important that brand alignment is. And I think for our listeners, you have to look at it from that same perspective. Your customer has a personal brand that is more important than your personal brand or your company's brand. Ultimately, we do our best work when all of those things are aligned, but it starts, as we just heard from Bruce Turkel, it starts when you start thinking all about them. Great stuff. Hey, before we wrap it up, let me just give you this word of encouragement. Your entire life has been spent in preparation for where you are right now. Now, think about that for just a moment. Your entire life has been spent in preparation for where you are right now. Maybe you've had some very tough experiences. They have prepared you for where you are right now. And perhaps things have gone really well for you. You're in a position to take advantage of where you are right now. Stop living in the past and thinking that the past dictates the future. It doesn't. The past is a launch pad for the future. Your entire life has been spent in preparation for where you are right now. The rest is up to you. Listen, I know it sounds corny, but believe it. Today really is the first day of the rest of your life. Go out and leverage all you've experienced in the past to make for an incredible future. All right, well, listen, at the beginning of the show, I told you that we were running a contest. You have the chance to win the Bose Quiet Comfort 25 acoustic noise-canceling headphones. I love these headphones. I wear them when I'm traveling. I wear them when I'm listening to podcasts or when I want to hear the strongest quality in my music. So for the winner, you can take your choice of either the over-the-ear or the noise-canceling earbuds. So you can listen to the Buyer's Mind podcast while you're working out, while you're going for a run, whatever it is. You get both a physical and a mental workout at the same time. So I'm giving away several Shore Consulting swag bags. That's my 5 books, a coffee mug, my motivational CD, and a bag to carry it all in. But one grand prize winner will win the Quiet Comfort headphones as well. So all you have to do is download the Buyer's Mind episodes on iTunes. So go to iTunes, download the episodes, subscribe to the podcast, and then just leave a quick review. It's going to take you all of 30 seconds. Once you've done that, go to jeffshore.com/podcast and click on the contest link. It'll just ask you for your email address and the name that you used for the review on iTunes so that we can pick the winners. We're going to give away 10 swag bags with the books and the mug and the CD and everything else. And then the grand prize, you'll have your choice of either the Bose Quiet Comfort 25 acoustic noise-canceling headphones or the noise-canceling Quiet Comfort 20 earbuds. So there you go. Get on that right away. All right, that's a wrap on this episode of The Buyer's Mind. Hope you enjoyed our podcast. Until next time, go out there and change someone's world.